So Emily and Dan have come down today. They come to fly some birds with us. Dan is a falconer, pest controller, and he's actually reminding me that I haven't done that video about Henry being vocal and vocalization in falconry birds themselves. So these guys are going to go and fly some black kites with us. I'll start thinking about putting that video together, which will be the rest of this video. Enjoy. So, noisy birds of prey, probably up there, if they're the right kind of noise or the wrong kind of noise, with the worst thing that can happen to you in falconry. I'm not talking about a bird that talks to you. Little chirping sounds, little tweets, little grunts, maybe like a harrisock. It's talking to you. I'm not even really talking about something like an excited falcon as you're walking up to feed it or to pick it up to fly. Yeah, kind of hideous, but and loud. But really, it's a very temporary thing. It's a bit of excitement in the moment, which the kind of noise I'm talking about will stop as soon as you carry on with something else. You start flying it, you get it in on the cage, you hook it, whatever. An owl that just talks to you in the moment and imprinted out when you take it food. We're really talking about the devastating sounds that birds of prey can make incessantly or for long periods of time. If it's not devastatingly annoying to you, most falconers don't like constant screaming birds, to be honest. Some don't mind. David Rampling, he loves his imprints and he's not bothered at all whether they make noise for a year or three until they sort of grow up mentally a bit more. I'm not as bothered as I used to be now that my birds are all here at the Falconry Centre. It's the same noise. Yes, it's a bigger space. It's just as irritating to my ears. But the reason it doesn't bother me so much is because it doesn't bother anyone else. And I think one of the most devastatingly difficult things that can really happen to you as a falconer is if you've got neighbours, which, let's face it, most people have. Those of you that haven't, yes, you're lucky swines. But birds of prey, pretty much throughout, do not make noises that are in any way agreeable to your hearing. If they sang like a canary, your neighbours would go, "Oh, can we come and listen to the birds? Beautiful." We like birds singing, songbirds singing. We find it very attractive and a beautiful sound, very relaxing, melodious. They're singing often in anger, not to enjoy us. They might be singing to shout to other rival males, "You come over here and you're dead, we're going to have a scrap. Get out, get out." But we find it lovely. Birds of prey, they're not songbirds and they just do not have singing voices. Most of them have quite a limited vocabulary, almost like perfunctory sounds to say certain things, but they don't need a big vocabulary. More exceptional being harrisogs because of their development in North America into pack hunting. So they do have quite a wide vocabulary that says things like, "Look out, there's a coyote. Look out, there's an eagle. Shh, down here, I've spotted prey." They have a vocabulary. Of all the birds here at the Falconry Centre that make a noise, the yellow-billed kites are probably the only ones that I can say, "Oh, that's quite nice." The kites have quite a nasally whistling sound. It's not too bad, even if it was at home in your garden with neighbours and it called every time it saw you because it was an imprint. When your falconry bird starts screaming, if it does, it really can impact on your neighbours. I don't want to hear your dog, if you live next door to me, whining all day long or barking all day long. I've got dogs. I like dogs. I don't want to hear my own dog doing that. I certainly don't want to hear a neighbour's doing that all day long. In so much as if you live next door to me and your kid liked basketball and you had a big patio, I really don't want to sit in my garden relaxing and hearing someone's kid bouncing a ball against the wall all day long. It just grinds you down. For most of us, I'm quite a sensitive person. Other people aren't. But generally, horrible noises incessantly do grind you down, and it will cause massive, or it's certainly likely to cause massive friction with your neighbours if you can't stop your bird from incessantly screaming. You can't dress it up nicely to them. You can't BS your way out of it. If they're putting up with that for long periods of time, it isn't nice, it isn't fair, and it will cause anxious relationships, which for most decent people will impact on your falconry, because now it's causing unhappiness and you're trying to mitigate it and you can't, and so on and so forth. So why do birds become screamers? Why are they incessantly noisy? My goodness me, this video will not be long enough, even if it's really long. Let's just quickly touch on imprints, and then we're going to move away from them, because really this falconry video is about parent birds that become problematic through incessant noise. So if you imprint a bird and you openly feed it from yourself, imprinting, if you don't know, hand rearing a bird from an egg or from a very, very small juvenile, a very small baby, just a few days old, it imprints on you instead of its own species. It sees you, you feed it, you look after it, therefore you must be its parent, therefore it must be what you are. Whatever you look like is what it thinks it looks like. It thinks it's a human in a way. But more importantly, it thinks you're its food provider. So let's just look at this really briefly. Birds, on the whole, feed their young. The young in the nest, certainly if there's more than one, that shout the loudest, gape the loudest in songbirds, show off, demand food the loudest, usually get fed first, and often get fed the most. So when the parents alight at the nest, baby birds generally open their gobs, beg for food, and shout for food, scream for food. Feed me, I'm starving. Oh, the poor parent, I must feed that one first, it's starving. They do it when they're not hungry. They just do it as a trigger, because their life depends on getting as much food as possible, preferably more than their siblings. It's a trigger mechanism that in the wild soon shuts off. Can you imagine a little blue tit sitting in a tree? It's now fledged the nest, it's finished being fed by its parents, it's got to look after its own food, but every time it sees another blue tit anywhere, it opens its mouth and starts calling. That parent bird, well, that other blue tit that is probably its sister or brother or someone else, nothing to do with it at all from a feeding point of view, ignores it. But every sparrowhawk sitting in a tree is going to go, what the heck? Wow, there's something, I can see its flash of colour, it's making a noise, it's calling me in. That trigger switches off. Birds become independent rapidly once they leave the nest. There's no point calling and shouting and advertising yourself, because no one's going to feed you. You're just advertising yourself to predators. It's just a trigger switch that in the brain ends, and it pretty much ends more or less forever. It's the same with your bird of prey. If you study peregrines at a cliff nest anywhere, they're common out there on a building in London, when they fledge and they start flying around and learning their skills and getting better in the air, their parents will still feed them. In fact, sometimes their parents will drop food in the air to kind of teach them how to move better in the air and even catch wounded prey. And they will make an awful racket. So they might be fledglings flying around in the sky. They'll see a parent bird with food. Rah, 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 rah. They'll scream. You'll hear them from a long distance away. But eventually their parents stop feeding them. They'll starve them out. They'll just ignore the screams until the birds get hungry enough, very hungry at times, to start killing on their own, and they become independent. And from then on, there is again no point that bird of prey making that incessant screaming noise. They might do a similar noise when they start to parent maturity, but generally the trigger's gone. They've learned to kill for themselves. They're getting plenty of food on their own, and they're self-sufficient. There is no need to make that noise ever again. With an imprint, you're its parent, but you never leave home, or you never turf it out of home. A little bit like a puppy, it's kind of always got its parents around. And with an imprint, anyone that rears them for hunting purposes, not display work, will tell you, get that thing hunting, get it hard penned, get it hunting its own food. The best way to not trigger constant screaming is to get the bird feeling independent as soon as possible. Some people will get their imprints hunting before they feel they've even got them really particularly well trained. They pretty much mostly come back to a lure or the glove, get them hunting, and they'll often get the manners and more manning done as time goes on, in a massive effort to control aggression to the falconer, but also that incessant imprint scream. So there's various ways around imprinting birds where they see you all the time, they see our world all the time, they get so used to it all, but they never associate the falconer with food. There's various ways of doing that. That's not for this video. So just touching on imprints, because you will imprint things like kites, you will imprint small vultures. They're quiet, they just hiss. You will imprint owls. Don't get a pet owl and hand rear it and think it's going to be some cute cuddly thing. It certainly isn't. It'll live way too long for your pet-like wants, and it will make a noise. Just an eagle owl hooting all night long, maybe just calling for a mate. You, because you've imprinted it, it thinks it's one of you. Hoo! Sounds quite nice. But on a still night, it travels for the best part of a mile. Your neighbours and you don't want to hear it all night long. So taking imprints away, because that's a complex subject, and getting a quiet imprint that doesn't make a calling or a screaming sound is absolutely doable. But imprints aren't for beginners. They're really not. Imprints are for people that understand the mind of a bird of prey, and they're the people that can fly an imprint, rear an imprint with it never making any more sound than a good parent-reared bird. So your parent-reared bird, why do they call, and which species are worst? Goodness me, why do they call? Lots of these reasons could roll into one. And what prompted me to make this video was Henry, my young Harris hawk. So why did he call? Okay, he's a Harris hawk. They're the #1 problem bird for making a noise. If you're getting into falconry, the biggest problem you're going to have is trying to not get a bird that starts screaming. Once it starts, it's likely to carry on for a year to 3 or even 4 years. But that first year will be the worst. It'll still be such a baby in its head. Can be incessant. Harris hawks are sociable birds. They are known for being pack hunters. They will stay with their parents longer, and they work as a team. So not only do they talk to each other more, they have a vocabulary that's probably a bit wider ranging than other birds of prey. It's so easy for a Harris hawk to leave its parents in the aviary, the breeding aviary. You take it for training. It's so easy because of their sociable and quite tame nature to just see you as a next source of food and call every time they see you. It starts because they get hungry, then again it reverts to being a habit. They see you, they're triggered to make a noise because the trigger is call for food quick. You might not be that hungry, call for food anyway. You don't know when your parents are coming past again. Harris hawks are the worst. The worst as in, not the worst sound, the worst as in the most likely bird of prey you're going to have that's going to start calling. It's incredibly complex. So someone kind of trolled me a bit on social media. When I got Henry, he was in the kitchen with my dogs and my granddaughter. Oh, classic mistake. Turning it into a pet. That thing will be a screamer. Huh. And I said, yes, I probably agree. The reason it's doing this is because its job is going to be working with children and the public, but a lot of people, a lot of times indoors in a school setting. My birds that work in schools have to be totally bomb-proof. They have to be totally relaxed around children. They have to be so relaxed they don't see them as a threat or anything to attack, not a rival or a threat. It's got to be background noise. Definitely a potential trigger is getting your bird quite pet-like, stroking it, talking to it all the time. That can be a trigger. Henry was reared in an aviary with incredibly brilliant parents who were parent-reared themselves. The breeder went in regularly and kind of played with the chicks. And that meant he produces chicks that are young Harris hawks at 16, 20 weeks old that are incredibly chilled out around humans from the day one. They're not stressful. They don't get highly stressed during the first few days of manning because they're used to seeing people or a person. But that's another great way to get you on the way to a noisy harrisawk. It's sort of almost like you're kind of an extended family member. Other people rear their harrisawks in open-fronted aviaries. Again, it makes for brilliant birds that just don't get so stressful. They've seen dogs, they've seen lawnmowers, they've seen people. The chances are they've got in the habit of seeing the breeder walk past, and a few seconds later, food appears through the food chute in the aviary. They might not see the person put the food in, but they probably start putting two and two together. Fresh food turns up as soon as that person walks past. Again, brilliant way to rear them, brilliant way to rear them. Often can create more of a chance of them being noisy indeed. Generalising, harrisawks and others. If you get a bird and you decide, or you're told to train the bird by starving it, literally, don't feed it if it doesn't do that. Don't feed it if it doesn't do that. Cut its weight down if it doesn't do that. Bring its weight down even more. Bring its weight down even more. It just seems to be the catchphrase in modern day falconry in the UK. Every answer to everything is one answer. Give it less food, make it hungry, when actually the exact opposite can be what you needed in that point in training. Cutting a bird's weight down sharp, whatever the species, parent reared in full seclusion aviaries where they've never seen a person until they're took up for training. Cutting that weight down hard and fast is a really good way to get bad habits, mantling on the glove, mantling on the lure, mantling on kills, and vocalization. Cutting weight down soon and fast is definitely a big step towards vocalization. And you're going to get that constant, incessant screaming. The best you can hope for with a screamer is it only does it when it sees you, but it will do it all the time it thinks you're around. But your neighbours get a reprieve when you're at work and you're not there. The worst screamers, the worst we've ever had here was a Chilean blue eagle buzzard, totally silent now, but its first 3 years, that thing screamed incessantly from dawn to dusk. I've had a red tail that will do the same, whether it's on its own or not. It is awful. Another real big trigger, and this is something that your red tail, your goshawk, your ferruginous buzzard hawk can easily slip into, even if you've done everything right and it's silent. You've got it hunting every day. It's self-sufficient. It feels independent. And I've had this a lot with goshawks. You work hard all day long, but in your falconry season through the winter, you get home 2 o'clock in the afternoon and you've got enough time to get out hawking for an hour or two every day. You've got the perfect life as a falconer. Your birds are brilliant. They get hunted every day, 5 days a week, 6 days a week, 7 days a week if you're lucky. But you get home at 2:30 every day. This perfect bird that you've done everything right, its body clock just knows that at about 2 o'clock, you're going to turn up. It's going to see you in the kitchen window, making yourself a cup of tea after work, getting your kit ready, and it'll just trigger. It's not the same incessant food scream of an imprint or a mal-imprint or a bird that's just associated you with feeding. Goshawk's just cool. I can't do bird noises, but pew, pew, pew. Not a peacock. That's not really right. But a constant screaming call. And they might be quiet all day long, but just before you get in, they'll start up and they won't stop until they've been hunting and fed. That's a really common thing, a really common trigger. It's definitely a big thing for me. That's another reason why Henry the harrisawk, another reason, because I think he's complicated. There's many reasons with him. I come into the falconry centre. I did all my training. I made those training videos. He sits in his aviary. He weathers on the lawn. He's in a free loft. I turn up, do my jobs, pick Henry up, fly Henry, put Henry away, and that's it. I might pick him up, take him to school, but he's in a travel box. He doesn't see me. He just sees me pick him up, and then I'm there at the other end, do a bit of flying, gets his food. That is a really common one again. When you don't really do much with your hawk, it doesn't even see much of you, but then you get that trigger because when it does see you, the fun's about to start. So it might not just be feeding, it might be taking it hunting, where it's waited all day long with a hungry tummy now to go hunting, and at the end of the day, get its food. and you're the trigger. Something to think about. My last Harris hawk, he was just treated like Henry. The difference was I was around him loads. I took him everywhere with me. If I was at home, I'd bring him in the house sometimes. If I was in the garden, there he was with me. And I flew him critically all different times of the day. There was never a routine for that Harris hawk. And unlike Henry, Nigel went hunting, and he was hunted 5 days a week for his first season. So although his job was nothing to do with falconry hunting, I still took him hunting. It makes a really good bond. And of course, we were out for hours working together. Not just, there's Dave, something happens, whatever, I still get fed, and then Dave clears off and does something else. Dave, seeing Dave, or you, is the trigger. So how can you prevent your hawk from becoming a screamer or a certainly highly vocal? Get the bird hunting, and get the bird hunting most days. If you can't get out hunting with your falconry bird relatively often, there's no point being a falconer. The hardest part about it is finding enough game and having the time to go hunting. Get hunting as early as you can. If that bird recalls and it's reasonably well manned, just go hunting. Catch up with the rest. Work on your recall if you have to, but also keep the manning process up as well as hunting. But just don't do 3 months of training and manning. Get hunting as soon as you can, as long as that bird will come back. You got telemetry on it. That's going to help, obviously, give you a bit of confidence. Number 2, this is the hard one. Try not to be in a routine. Your bird doesn't need to fly at 3 o'clock every afternoon. I hear people with goshawks say that all the time. Oh, I fly it in the afternoon, it doesn't work in the morning. Well, it would if you flew it in the morning and the afternoon. Just feed it accordingly. If you're going to fly it later in the afternoon, but relatively mid-morning the next day, don't feed it any casting, any bones or fur, or bones are okay, but any fur or feather. Feed it less because you're going out sooner. But having no routine is one way to stop the bird just body clock setting in at 2 o'clock, you come home, and it will just start calling incessantly. Number 3, weird as it may sound, usually it works better if you're around the bird a lot of the time, not just when you go hunting or just when you go flying. A bird that's around you all the time doesn't have that same trigger. That's one way of working with them when you rear an imprint as well, actually. It doesn't have that same trigger to start calling, to set its body clock by. So that's one really good reason, if you can, be around the bird, but that's really difficult for most of it. And again, to do with that trigger response, really, don't feed your bird in the afternoon every day, because 2 or 3 days a week you go hunting and you go in the afternoon. If the bird's sitting there on an empty tummy all day long, waiting for you to feed it at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, there's nothing better that's going to trigger off that body clock screaming. There really isn't. Think about it from your point of view. I work really hard. I often don't have breakfast. I often don't eat till the evening. And to be honest, when I am working really hard, I don't often think about food too much. Might have a biscuit if I get a chance. But I'll be starving in the evening when I've stopped and I'm thinking about food. But when I did a really boring factory job, I ate so much junk food all day long. Crisps, biscuits, sandwiches. It was such a boring job. I alleviated the boredom really by snacking all the way through the day. I can tell you now, if I'd have forgot my packed lunch, my God, would I have felt starving, hungry all day. Because that bird's sitting there, it's kind of got not a lot to think about. It's getting hungrier and hungrier and hungrier. No way to obtain its own food because it knows it's tethered. It's just waiting for you to come home. If you're not going to fly it, feed it earlier in the day. Don't have a feeding routine. But leaving birds sitting there hungry all day, if you're not going to do anything with your bird when you're going from work, give it a good blowout of food in the morning. Because at night, it's not going to call all night necessarily because it's asleep. Don't have a routine. Don't leave it sitting there hungry for no good reason whatsoever. And of course, don't fly your birds at a silly, sharp, hungry weight when there's absolutely no need to at all. If your bird's doing something well, start increasing its weight. Up to the point it stops doing it well. Bring it back down. The weight, as we talked about on the Harris Hawk training videos, the weight your bird needs to be to first carry out a task, fly to you on the creance, that weight's down to that weight because you're using hunger to overcome the lack of confidence. Once the bird's confidence in a task, you might find it can be doing that task at a far higher weight. If you're being flown, fitness, you're getting the exercise, you're an athlete, but you're being fed on a tiny diet when you were wimpy and were skinny, you're trying to build muscle out of nothing. You're going to feel so hungry. You need more energy to do more work. Get the weight up with your birds to the point whatever you want them to do starts to tail off and become unreliable. Then bring it down to get the happy medium. Really complex video. It's already long. It's just an insight. But there's some massively complex issues, guys, when it comes to noisy birds of prey and screamers, full-on, incessant screaming birds. Very, very complex. And if you're thinking about becoming a falconer, guys, really delve deep into that subject. People will tell you all kinds of things. Don't get a Harris hawk until it's 6 months old. Or it might be quiet, it might be noisy. Get it when it's 6 months old, it'll be quiet. I've seen people say, don't get a Harris hawk. Put that Harris hawk in a seclusion pen on its own, where it can't see anyone or anything apart from the sky for a whole year. Then it won't be noisy. What's the point? What's the point? You've missed that opportunity with your Harris hawk or other falconry bird, where it's young like a sponge. It's ready to build up its cardio, fitness, its heart, its lungs, as well as its muscle fitness, physical fitness. And you're letting it sit around in an aviary. You're letting its mind close. It will always be a lesser bird mentally and physically. Either don't become a falconer if noise could be a problem, or choose your species carefully. Ferruginous hawks, they all make a noise. Red-tailed hawks, most of them start being noisy screamers when they get set in a routine. Harris hawks can be dreadfully noisy around their owners, especially if they're cut down in weight. They can become very bad food screamers. Goshawks, most of them will call if in a routine. They'll call by mid-afternoon. Not so bad, but still annoying. You won't have a golden eagle that over its time with you, if you keep it for several years, will always be quiet. Golden eagles are intelligent too. They'll start calling when they see you all the way through the season, however parent-reared they are. You've got to mitigate noise. You've got to expect some noise, but you've really got to try and prevent incessant screaming. See you in the next one.